that you could attend this workshop on compensation negotiation. My name is Dr. Leo. I started here at UCF in the fall of 2011. Previously worked and co-managed a small Italian restaurant. And since that time, I have been at UCF. I received my master's in management with a focus on strategic human resource management in 2011. And because I'm a glutton for punishment and didn't learn my lesson, I went back to school and was accepted into the University of Florida. Don't hate me, go Gators. Doctoral program in business administration, which I completed in 2018. So, and that's it. I'm done now with the schools and degrees. But for any of you interested in an advanced degree, I would recommend it. That's something that is a transferable skill and can be something that can be leveraged during your negotiation. So let's start. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can all of you see my screen? And I do want to make this somewhat of an interactive session, so please feel free to chime in. Share my sound too. I've got a few short videos I want to share. Okay, yes, excellent. All right. Let's get started then. This is Compensation Negotiation 101. Now, who's this individual right here? Anyone recognize this icon? Shout it out if you know this person.
Don't remember his name, but he's from Monopoly.
Correct. This is the Monopoly person, the Monopoly man. And he's upset today because he forgot the golden rule for every negotiation. And that is simply that 80% of the negotiation takes place before the actual negotiation. Isn't that strange? I mean, that almost doesn't make any sense saying that out loud. How can 80% of a negotiation take place before the actual negotiation? Can someone explain that? What are your thoughts?
Maybe based off of your resume?
Okay, so maybe the resume wasn't completed. 80% of the negotiation happens before the negotiation. What do we think? Lily says in the chat, you need to sell yourself as an asset before trying to negotiate a salary with someone. Definitely, that's a very good point. You should be aware of your own self-worth for sure. Brittany says, based on how you present yourself in the interview. Hannah's asking about market value. Yeah, these are all good points. Here's the big takeaway from this number. Negotiation, like everything in life, requires practice, 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 preparation, preparation, preparation. Okay? I see so many failed negotiations happen when people try to negotiate on the fly. That means you've walked into a used car dealer, you've walked into your employer's office, and you kind of have an idea of what you want to ask for. And in the moment, you start making split decisions. And so this rule, okay, this number, I want this number burned and singed in your minds before you approach any negotiation, whether it's a distributed negotiation where you're buying or selling a house or a used car, a motorcycle, or I should say, when you are talking to an employer about your compensation package. You need to do your research before you walk in. You need to know what your walk-away point is, or what we call a BATNA. You need to know your reservation price. Having done your research, you should know how much to ask instead of sound like an idiot and sound unprepared. Okay, so just remember this number, that 80% of every negotiation should take place before the actual negotiation. So the topics that I'm going to cover today in this session are all negotiation topics as it relates to your compensation. I want to talk about common misconceptions. Why don't people negotiate? Why don't we negotiate, especially students? Most of you that are soon to be graduates, most of you might not feel like you want to negotiate. So what are these common misconceptions? I'm going to try to separate fact from myth. I'm going to show you research, specifically where you need to go to try to find a market rate appropriate salary, depending upon the field, the industry in which you are looking to get into. I'm going to discuss a couple of common negotiation tactics like BATNA, ZOPA, and RP. We're going to discuss compensation and salary. And I'm going to try to also dispel another myth that your salary is your compensation. If I were watching The Office right now with Michael Scott would be like, no, salary is not your compensation. Salary is a piece of your compensation package, but it isn't the entire package. And then finally, what are you going to do when they make you an offer that you can't refuse? Can you refuse the offer? Yes, you can. And I'm going to show you how to tactfully refuse the offer and develop a counter offer. So let's get started. Common misconceptions. And I'm going to open the floor here. Okay. What are some reasons why people don't negotiate? These are common misconceptions. Unmute your mic and tell me. What do you think? Common misconceptions. Maybe, okay, so Lily says in the chat, no, they don't think it's an option. Patricia says people are scared. They're intimidated to negotiate. And this is also a very good misconception. Olivia, I like this one. I don't want to come across sounding greedy, right? Very good. Other common misconceptions, why people don't negotiate. Yeah, Brittany says, well, we don't know how. And that's why you're here today, right? These are all really good points. They think they'll lose the opportunity. Okay, Frank, that's a really good comment. Yeah, if I try to negotiate my salary, they may reject the offer. They may rescind the offer. And I don't want to lose the deal altogether, Olivia says. Very good. So these are all very good common misconceptions. Why don't we negotiate? And so before I even showed you the slide, most of you kind of hit the nail right on the head. Or how about this one? I have to take the first offer that I receive, or I have to take the first offer I receive from the company that I really want to work for. Or maybe they've already made me their best offer, right? They may revoke the offer if I attempt to negotiate. These are all common misconceptions. So I don't want you to feel scared or apprehensive when you start negotiating your compensation package. There's ways to do it, and there are ways that you don't want to do it. And I'm going to try to share with you those ways that you do want to do it, okay? So now let's move over to research. Not to sound cliche, but information is power. And this is especially true in any negotiation. The common rule here, the golden rule, is whoever has more information in a negotiation typically has a slight advantage. And when you're looking at compensation, this is no different. So here's the first piece of advice. As all of you start applying for jobs, okay, the first thing that you have to do before you even schedule the interview is research the position. Research the job position and find specifically a range of a salary for that position. Now, some of you might think, well, what if it's a new position? What if the position title doesn't exist? Then my advice is to look at the job description, identify the tasks, duties, and responsibilities that they're asking for their applicants, and then try to find an appropriate benchmark. Like business analysts. I can't tell you how many business analyst positions exist. There's tons of them. You need to try to find a market rate appropriate salary range for a business analyst. So there's always a range. Remember this. No time in the history of any HR department did, or has the HR department said, where you want to hire for a marketing analyst, and we're going to pay the marketing analyst $63,274. And that's it. There's ever no fixed number. There's always a range. It's your job to find the range. The other thing that's important is make sure that you're looking in the appropriate zip code. All right. Now, I've mentored students that have accepted jobs in California. One accepted a job for $70,000 in California, right outside of San Francisco. Sounds great, right? Yeah. $70,000 won't even buy you a parking spot in San Francisco. Okay. So there is, a geographic region to consider. New York, California, some areas that the cost of living are astronomically high. You need to keep that in mind. Now, $70,000 in Oviedo, Florida, and you are literally a king or live like a queen. Okay. That's a lot of money. So make sure that you've got the zip code in mind while you're researching the position. Now, for those of you that are currently working and you're happy where you are, and you may think, well, what does this compensation negotiation workshop have to do with me? You can use the same principles I'm going to talk about today to help justify an increase in your pay the next time you have a conversation with your boss or the HR manager at your organization. Okay, so this also can apply to you. All right, so salary websites. Here's where I want all of you right now. Stop what you're doing. If you're multitasking on with various tabs, pull out your cell phones, please, if you would, and open up your camera app. And I want you to take a picture of this particular slide. When I say research the position, I mean that I want you to go to each of these links to try to find a market rate appropriate salary range for the position that you are applying. So salary.com, bls.gov, eri.com, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, or naceweb.org, PayScale, Glassdoor, Indeed, salaryexpert.com. Some of these sites will require that you create a free account. Totally worth it. Do that and compile all of your research. You are looking for a market rate appropriate salary range for the position based on the zip code in which you are applying. All right. Hopefully you've got a snap of this. And I tell my students, a lot of you spend so much time on final projects and final papers and reports. This is where it really makes a lot of sense for you to spend a considerable amount of time doing your research before you step into a negotiation. Okay, so don't just spend 5 minutes on this. I mean, I really need you to spend a considerable amount of time finding the right market rate appropriate salary. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about common terms. So what's a BATNA? Anyone know what a BATNA is? If you want to say it out loud or throw it in the chat, what does BATNA stand for in negotiation? BATNA. What is a BATNA? Anyone know? Guesses? It's a country in northern Algeria. Yeah, I'm not making that up. It's actually a country in northern Algeria. But for purposes of our discussion today, it stands for best alternative to the negotiated agreement. This is your walk away. This is key in any negotiation. If you have a high BATNA, then you have options. And what I tell my students is that I would love for you to have multiple offers on the table. And if you are currently a student at UCF, my advice as not only your faculty member, but as a former employer, I would engage in internships. I would take advantage of career services, of Handshake, to try to garner several offers. I had a student that came into my office about 2 or 3 years ago. This is pre-pandemic. And this student was in tears. Okay. She was really, really upset. And I sit down with her immediately. I said, what's going on? She's like, well, I've got this big problem here. I did an internship for this company. They offered me a position. And the other company that I did an internship with last semester, they reached out. They offered me a position. I just don't know what to do. I don't know what the right answer is. Immediately, I start smiling. I mean, I can't even hold the grin off my face. She looks at me. She said, did I say something funny? I was like, no, listen, this is exactly the kind of problem that I want you to have. Because now with 2 offers on the table, you have a very strong BATNA, right? For those of you that are hitting the workforce now and you have 1 offer, can you still negotiate? Of course you can still negotiate, but your BATNA is much lower. I want you to be in the position of that student, to have multiple offers on the table. And then we go to your decision-making criteria to decide which company do I want to start off with, company A or company B? And oftentimes there's no wrong answer. The other thing I want to share with you is, and listen closely, this is very important for all of you to hear this. Your first job out of school is not going to be your last job. Oftentimes we put so much pressure and so much stress on ourselves trying to find the answer to the question, what do I want to be when I grow up? What do I want to do for the rest of my life? Let me tell you something, all right? The business world has changed dramatically. It used to be, okay, it used to be 30, 40 years ago, you would graduate from a university, you guaranteed a job. You'd be guaranteed a job. You work for the same company for 20 years, 30 years. You get a gold watch. You get a pension. Congratulations. Yeah, that business world doesn't exist anymore. If you look at the data, US Census clearly states, and a lot of other sites support this, Most individuals will now change their job titles and or positions 6 to 8 times before you retire. So why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because I don't want you to walk around like you've got a ton of bricks on your shoulders trying to find the perfect job outside of school. Chances are that is not going to happen. Okay. The question maybe you should be asking yourself is, where do I see myself for the next 3 years? How can I grow and develop as a young professional? Don't ever feel like you don't have options. Don't ever feel like you have to be married to your first job out of school. All right. You have options. You will have options. And to answer that $1,000,000 question, what do I want to be when I grow up? I think it's an unfair question. It took me 10 years to answer that question. Okay. 10 years of working in a very different industry than academia. And so I think the goal for all of you should be, where do I see myself for the next 3 years, the next 5 years? Where can I learn and grow and develop? And if you find out that you absolutely hate what you're doing for the first 3 years out of school, was that a waste of time? Absolutely not. Now we can rule that off the list. So don't feel this pressure that your first job has to be the perfect job. It's not going to be. Chances are it's not going to be. You will end up changing your job title and career multiple times. So your BATNA is important in any negotiation. What do you do if you have other offers on the table? And do you leverage them? Yes, absolutely you can. So what I instruct students specifically, I say, don't ever go to a company and say, well, Target's going to give me 50,000. So what are you going to give me? That's the wrong way to do it. The way that I like to coach students during this conversation is, once the company has offered you the position, you are to sound excited. I want you to sound grateful. This is wonderful news. I really think that my values align perfectly with the company. I do have 2 questions though for you. When can you send me the offer in writing? I'd like to review it. And when does this offer expire? Because I have other offers I need to consider. Boom, that's it. Those are your 2 questions when you get the call from the recruiter or the HR manager or the company that wants to hire you for the position. You sound excited, you sound grateful, you sound elated. You sound grateful, you sound excited, you sound elated. You say, once again, I'm going to repeat this. Thank you so much for this offer. I really feel I know I can add value day one. I feel like my values align with the organization. My 2 questions are this: when can you send me this offer in writing? And when does this offer expire? Because I have other offers I need to consider. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more as we get further into the workshop on navigating that conversation. But typically the call, and it will be a call, it'll come from a recruiter or HR manager. Sometimes it might be in an email, but your response is always going to be the same. All right. Now, what about this bullet point? You've accepted the first offer, but now have a second offer on the table. I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with students who work for who've done 2 internships, right? They've got an internship with company A and an internship with company B. They don't really want to work for company A. Like, it's not bad, but it's not their dream job. Company B, on the other hand, that's their dream job. Guess what happens? Life always works out this way. Company A will make you the offer first while you're waiting to hear back from company B. So now what do? My piece of advice here is ask for an extension for company A. If they say that they can give you 3 to 5 days to think about it, ask to see if you can extend that to at least a week, maybe 2 weeks. Always ask for an extension of when the offer is going to expire. All right. Now, some companies might not be in a position where they can extend it that long, but if they can, that might buy you enough time to wait to hear back from company B. Let's say that you've asked for the extension and unfortunately they say no. If you accept the offer from company A, okay, and then a week later company B comes in and gives you the offer, it's bad form to then go back to company A and say, look, I know I accepted the offer, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to reject it now. If you do that, and listen, I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to do what's right for you. But understand that if you do that, you burn the bridge for company A. You can never go back to them. All right. So make sure, have you ever heard this expression, the grass is always greener on the other side? Just make sure that company B is definitely worth it if you have to burn company A. Okay. And of course, once you've accepted an offer, you cannot renegotiate it. Another story. A few years ago, I'm teaching a class. I've got a young student in my class. He was interning for a Fortune 500 company. This is his graduating semester. Okay. Last class he's going to take. He comes in really excited. He's on cloud nine. He says, "Hey, Professor Leo, guess what? I got some great news. That company that I was interning with? Yeah, they offered me the job. And I accepted immediately, and it's wonderful. And oh my gosh, I can't tell you how good this feels, knowing that I'm all set up right after I graduate, and all I got to do is worry about finishing this class, and I'm good." And I was happy for this student. This student was obviously very excited, very happy. Now, what happened? About a week later, he comes back into class, and he says, "Hey, Professor Leo, you know how I told you I accepted the job, last week at that company?" I said, "Yeah." He asked me, "Do you think maybe I should have negotiated my offer?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Oh, okay. Professor Leo, do you think it's too late now for me to negotiate the offer?" I looked at him and I said, "Yes." Emotions can be very dangerous here. Another piece of life advice, call this a Leoism. Never make decisions based on your emotions. Oftentimes that gets us into a lot of trouble. And in business, that can be fatal. Okay. When you get the call from the recruiter or the HR manager of the company that you want to work for, they're going to sound really happy. They're going to make it sound like you won the lotto. And in that moment, you're going to feel amazing, invincible. You're going to feel relief. You're going to want to say yes faster than you can say yes. When you get the call, I want you to sound excited. I want you to be excited. I want you to show that appreciation to the recruiter, but do not give them a yes or no on the phone. You end the conversation exactly how I told you before. "I'm very excited about this. I have 2 questions. When can you send me this offer in writing? Because I'd like to review it. And my second question is, when does this offer expire?" And of course, if you have other offers on the table, then you add that other nugget. "I have other offers I need to consider." Okay. In the moment, do not let your emotions take you away. And it's hard to do, easier said than done. But do not make decisions based on your emotions. Okay. That often has devastating consequences. I'm speaking from experience, by the way. All right. Now, what about Opa? Opa, Greek restaurant. Yay. No, actually, it's Zopa. Zopa is the actual term. I just saw Opa and I got excited. For those of you that have not been to the Opa restaurant, I was there a few years ago. It was actually a lot of fun. But ZOPA is the actual compensation negotiation term, and it stands for the Zone of Possible Agreement. All right, so check out the screen right in front of you here. You've got an employer range. Okay, so the employer has a range in mind. Lily, I'm going to get to your question in 1 second, okay? Your employer has a salary range in mind. You have a salary range in mind. So the employer will give out their initial offer. And then the employer has an RP, or reservation point. So this is the maximum amount of money that they are authorized to pay you based on what HR tells them. Okay. Now you're on this range. So you have a reservation point. What's the minimum amount of money that you will accept? Now remember, you've already got all of this information because 80% of the negotiation takes place before the negotiation. You already have your reservation point in mind. This is not stuff you want to figure out on the fly. This is why most negotiations end up in failure. Then you have your initial offer. Now think about this. The employer is not going to start off with their highest offer. Okay, they just won't. Their job is to get you as cheap as possible without devaluing you. And that's somewhat of a relative term that I just mentioned, right? And so any employer in the world is never going to go up to you and say, "Hey, Lily, tell me, what's the minimum amount of money I can pay you in order for you to accept this job?" I mean, that's just not going to happen. Okay. Instead, they'll get to that number in a very sneaky way. It's an employer trick that I've seen some employers use. And I want to warn all of you about this trick. So if you see it coming, you're able to evade. The yellow part here, the highlighted part, this represents the zone of possible agreement. right? They have their reservation point, you have your reservation point, and hopefully the ZOPA is going to be somewhere in the middle. So let me tell you what the employer trick is, okay? They may just ask for your range instead. They may say, well, and Lily, I'm gonna pick on you since you're the last name in the chat. Well, Lily, I appreciate that you applied for the company here. Your resume looks quite impressive. Tell us, what range are you looking at? And Lily, because you didn't take my compensation negotiation workshop, you don't know really how to answer this. And you say, well, my range is anywhere between 42,000 to 48,000. Now, as the employer, I'm immediately going to anchor the conversation on 42,000. Lily, I am so sorry. I just have to be honest with you. 42,000 was a bit higher than what we had anticipated for the role. I'm not even sure I can get approval from HR to grant 42,000. Now, see what I'm doing? I'm talking about 42,000. I'm anchoring you to 42,000. I'm starting the negotiation based on your reservation point. And so the most that you could hope to achieve now is 42,000. But now it looks like it's going to be 37.5, 36,000, maybe 38. Okay. So when they ask you for the range, I like to kind of throw the ball right back in their court and say, well, obviously your team wrote the description. You probably have a number in mind. What range was the organization considering? And see if they give you a range. And if they give you a range, then you can use anchoring bias with the top end of that number, 48,000. Wow, I was expecting that to be a bit higher based on the qualifications that I bring to the table. Okay, now let me address the question. Lily, can you say that you are other offers to consider even if you don't? Okay. Or would they pry and try to find out what your other offers are? That's a good question. It's risky, Lily. I would say it would be risky to let them know that you do have other offers on the table. Sometimes they may ask, but that's proprietary information. And if they do ask you, I would just say, well, out of respect for all of the stakeholders involved, I don't know if it would be appropriate for me to reveal which companies I'm applying to. So you'll want to come up with a canned soundbite of an answer in the event they call you out on that. Okay. You could, if you do have legitimately another offer on the table and it's from one of their competitors, you might be able to play some of that salary negotiation, kind of against the company that you're currently talking to and say, well, the other offers from Siemens, and all I can tell you is that it's a market rate appropriate salary. And use this phrase, everyone, market rate appropriate salary. All right, you commit that phrase to memory. I'm looking for a market rate appropriate salary. And remember, salary and compensation are two different things. Right now, I'm just talking about salary. Market rate appropriate salary. All right. Now let's move on to salary and compensation. Are these the same thing? No, they are not. Salary is the number. The salary is what everyone is so fixated on. But now, living in the age that we do, kind of post-pandemic-ish, one big piece of negotiating, a large negotiating bargaining chip on the table is now the ability to work from home. And I've read so many articles now in the Wall Street Journal, and I'm sure all of you have seen articles that talk about employers and employees not wanting to return back to work or wanting some kind of a hybrid approach. So I want you to think of your compensation as a basket of goods, almost like a gift basket, like what I have here on the screen, but more so than just pretzels, more like boom, champagne, Dom Perignon, chocolate covered almonds, a little bit of vino. That's your compensation package, right? Godiva. And what makes up your compensation package? All of these things here on the screen. Things to consider and things that you can negotiate. Health insurance, vacation time. Does the company offer a 401k or 403b? And even more specifically, do they offer a Roth 401k or a Roth 403b? And what's the match? Meaning whatever you put into that investment account, what money will they match you? Here's the other personal finance 101. Okay, I'm going to do a side lecture here real quick. Once you start working, and you have access to contribute to a firm's 401k. Ask if they have a Roth 401k versus a traditional 401k. The Roth 401k provides more long-term tax-sheltered benefits. Whatever the match is, regardless of if you negotiate or not, regardless of anything in this workshop I talk about today, whatever the match is, you contribute up to the match. Okay? So if they match 3%, then you contribute 3% of your salary. Because what that means is they're going to basically give you a 100% return on your money. It is impossible to get that in the market. So you always, always, always contribute to your firm's 401k or 403b up to the match, at a minimum, up to the match. All right. And then you open up a Roth IRA. And that's a separate workshop, by the way, Personal Finance 101. What does finance look like once you graduate? Yeah, but do some research on Roth IRA. Go to Vanguard or T. Rowe Price for that. And for purposes of our conversation here, 401ks and 403bs, you contribute up to the match. Okay, other benefits for your compensation. Do they offer a pension? A lot of companies don't do this anymore, but if they do, that's fantastic. Sick days, PTO stands for paid time off. What about travel? What about your telecommute? If I were to offer you $5,000 less, would it be acceptable to give you the option to work from home 3 days a week? A lot of you would probably say, yeah. If you're working downtown Orlando, guess what? You're going to burn an hour on I-4 getting there and an hour coming home. That's going to get old real fast Monday to Friday. Okay. Academic tuition reimbursement. Now, listen, obviously I'm biased because I'm a faculty member, but I tell students all the time, sometimes it's worth it taking a lower salary and working for an organization that offers tuition reimbursement. Because if you want to go back to school and let's say, I don't know, the College of Business and get a master's in business administration, most MBAs from an AACSB accredited school will cost you anywhere between $30,000 to $50,000. And so if you get an offer, a salary is $35,000 a year, all right, that's kind of low, right? And you do an MBA and they're willing to pay you for that, I want you to add the other 30 grand to your net, to your take home. Remember, you don't have to be married to your first company, but if they're willing to offer you tuition reimbursement, that might be enough to offset the lower salary, at least for the first 3 to 5 years. Okay. Other benefits here include intangibles, things that are harder to quantify. What about the culture of this company? Do you feel like you would be a good fit? Is it formal? Is it laid back? Is it fun? Is it creative? Are there sufficient areas for professional growth and development? What about sense of purpose? Do I feel like I'm making a difference at this company, or do I feel like I'm just another, clog in the wheel here, right? And so I wouldn't discount these things. Oftentimes as undergrads, and even some of our grad students, they focus solely on the money. And the money's good, and the money's important, and I don't want to downplay the money. And by the way, you're not a greedy person if you're motivated solely by money. Money helps us buy things, money helps us play. But speaking from experience, I can tell you, if you're not happy where you work, the money is going to normalize. Meaning after about 6 months, it's going to be harder to get out of bed in the morning when your alarm clock goes off at 7 o'clock. All right. It is possible to find something that you love to do. I don't think it's probable that you'll find it immediately out of school. It took me 10 years. It takes a lot of people sufficient amount of time to figure out who they are, what they want out of life. Another Leoism that I love to share. You don't know what you don't know. And so once you graduate from UCF and you start working somewhere and you're not happy or you don't feel fulfilled, that's okay. Start looking for something else. Start preparing a pivot, a switch to a different industry, or maybe a different position. You don't have to be married to your first job. You don't know what you don't know. All right. All right. How do you quantify this? What I would do for that list that I showed you is I would try to, on a scale from 1 to 5, 5 being cannot live without, 1 being I could care less. I want you to quantify each of the elements in your compensation package when you get it. How important is salary to you? 401ks, health insurance, vacation, paid time off, tuition reimbursement, growth and development opportunities, culture. And in Microsoft Excel or on a sheet of paper, literally quantify this. If you have an offer from company A and an offer from company B. This will help you make a more data-driven, informed decision. All right. What about this second bullet point? What value would you assign to, pay time off versus working from home 2 days a week? 80% of the negotiation takes place before the negotiation. This takes time like anything else. I want to make sure that you make the right decision for you. And what's interesting about this is that no two decisions are going to be the same. There's no right or wrong decision here. I may value something a lot more than some of you may value something. All right, now let's talk about the offer. First and foremost, discussing compensation and salary. You never, ever, ever talk about money or salary or compensation during the ... interview. Thank you, Hannah. Well done. Yes, you never, ever mention anything as it relates to money during the interview. Okay, Brittany had a question. What do you do when the firm states that they offer tuition reimbursement coverage as a way to lure you in, but once you're working, you find the process of getting approved is difficult and the employer denies approval? Oh, that's not good. So if they lied, that's a problem. Some companies, Brittany, will offer you tuition reimbursement with an asterisk. And the asterisk is you have to stay here at least 2 years after you finish the degree. Now, I don't see that as a problem. I see that as you, Brittany, killing two birds with one stone. Because on one hand, what are you doing? You're getting that advanced degree. On the other hand, you're also building valuable experience on your resume. All of you know this too. Most jobs you start applying for ask for at least 2 years of minimal experience. You come out of school, it doesn't look good to job hop from job to job. In fact, I tell students when I review resumes, don't put positions that you've been anywhere less than a year, especially if you have multiple positions lined up. Because as an HR manager, I'm going to judge you based on your shelf life, and that's kind of a restaurant term. How long can I get out of you before you jump ship? So if you accept a job at a company and they do offer tuition reimbursement, but it is a slow and gradual process, that might be something that you need to consider. Is it still going to be worth it? Is it going to take me at least 6 months to get in? And if so, do they have a stipulation where I have to stay with them at least a year or two afterwards? And if so, that's fine. You'll leave that company with 3 to 5 years of experience and an advanced degree, which should make you a bit more marketable. Okay. Richard, what if they ask for your salary expectations first? Okay, excellent question, Richard. I hate when companies do this. During the interview, Richard, now I want to pick on you, Richard. They might say, well, Richard, we were very impressed with your resume. We're glad you could come in today for the interview. Before we get started, tell me, what salary expectation were you thinking for this position? Richard and everyone else in the room, this is how I answer this question. Well, to be honest with you, Dr. Leo, I think that any discussion of compensation might be a bit premature until we've gotten to know each other a little bit better. Would it be okay if we table that until at least the end of the interview? All right, that's your first response. All right. Your second response is, well, Dr. Leo, I'm honestly not comfortable negotiating my compensation package unless I know I'm being offered the position. Are you offering me the position? Remember, you have no leverage during the interview. So during the interview, you keep your mouth shut as it relates to salary or money. Okay. Do not discuss it. And if they bring it up, that's how you would respond. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. You have the most leverage when you are negotiating your compensation package when they offer you the job. Let me backstep. When they make you the offer. Okay. Think about this, Richard. If you've interviewed for us, right, and I have my HR manager or recruiter call you with an offer, what does that mean on the back end of the HR department? That means, Richard, that I've checked your references. That means that the interview committee or myself, whoever interviewed you, decided that we love you, we want you. That means that you've passed every selection criteria that we've laid out. At that point, that's when you have the most leverage. That's when we can now really have a conversation about negotiation or compensation negotiation. Any time before then, you have no leverage. You're just another candidate. Now, if the employer brings it up, so Richard just asked this question. So if they ask for salary expectations first, again, I say, honestly, I'd be a bit more comfortable if we got to know each other a little bit better first before we talked about salary. Would it be okay to table that conversation until the end of the interview. Because the interview period is when you need to make them fall in love with you. And also keep this in mind, you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. So don't be nervous. Don't be trembling during the interview. Don't be arrogant. I don't want you to be arrogant or cocky, but I do want you to be aware of your self-worth. You're determining fit. Is this a place where I can add value? Do I see myself? Okay. So response number one, and it's on the screen, until you've decided you definitely want me, and I've decided that I definitely could help you with your tasks, any discussion of salary might be a bit premature. Okay. I like this canned response. Commit that to memory. Response number two, I'll gladly answer that, but could you first help me understand what the job involves? This is kind of the point of the interview, to do a deeper dive, more than just what's posted on the job description, the minimum and the preferred qualifications on the job description. And the response number three, if they keep pushing you and say, okay, come on, Richard, just come out with a number. Based on my research, I'm looking for a salary in this particular range. Let's say the range was 52,000 to 65,000. I might start up a little bit higher, 55 to 65,000, but I'm open to hearing what the complete package would be in terms of benefits. Okay. If they absolutely won't let you proceed before the actual interview. All right. Now, what about this? Automated applications. God, I hate these. Fill out this automated application, and there's a box that says desired salary. Shame on them for trying to squeeze this information out of you. I tell students, you leave the box blank, you keep it empty. Some HRIS systems require that you put a number in there. And if you cannot proceed with the application without putting a number in, I advise students to put in all zeros or all nines, whichever one it accepts. Try all zeros first. And the HR recruiter might call you and say, I'm so sorry, Richard, but there seems to be a problem with your application. You want to get paid $999 million. And then you come in with one of those canned responses. Roland asks, in the case where you are an international student working with OPT, is it appropriate to discuss H-1B or green card during negotiation, or wait till they bring it up? Oh, that is such a tough question. So Roland, it's if you are an international student, it's an uphill battle. Okay, because in order for an employer to sponsor you, they have to prove that an American citizen is not qualified to do the position that you're looking for, and they have to pay. I mean, it's a very costly and expensive process. What I would do, Roland, if I were in your shoes, is I would look for companies that have sponsored international students in the past. And this is not something that I would bring up immediately. Okay, I would wait for them after you've had several conversations with them to discuss your international residency, your international status. But I would strongly recommend that you check out career services websites, but there's also Global UCF, and see if you can procure a list of employers that historically have hired international students. I can tell you, if it's specialized skills in engineering, some students have gotten more success versus kind of generic skills like business. And I'm not saying that it doesn't happen in the College of Business, but it's a lot harder in the College of Business unless it's a very specialized set of skills. Okay. Remember that recruiters and HR managers will put some pressure on you, and they're going to make it sound like the offer is going to expire immediately and they need a yes or no. Sometimes they'll throw at you something called an exploding offer. They may say, Roland, I'm going to pick on you now. Roland, they may say, Roland, I need an answer by the end of the day. So the offer expires at 5 o'clock. Now, I don't hear that as frequent as I used to, which is good. That's called an exploding offer, where you're kind of put on the spot and you only have a few hours to decide. My recommendation then would be a conditional acceptance. I accept on the conditions that blah, 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 and then you state your terms, okay? Anchoring is a very, very powerful psychological tool. It's almost irresistible when it happens. And that's why it's so important that whoever throws out the first number, be aware of that. All right. If they ask you and you happen to throw out the first number in this negotiation conversation, then make sure that you've thrown out a number that is in the upper quartile of the range that you have investigated. Check out this short video of this experiment and the power of anchoring.
A bottle of wine in the survey is...
In this experiment, students are asked to bid for a bottle of wine.
It's a nice bottle.
Rational economics suggests they will carefully calculate what it's worth to them. But before the bidding begins, they're asked to write the last 2 digits of their Social Security number on their bid sheet. Astonishingly, the people who bid the highest for the wine were those who had the highest Social Security numbers. Unwittingly, they've been influenced by a completely irrelevant number.
It is a great illustration of anchoring. People are anchored on some number they were given, even when they constructed it at random, like the last 2 digits of their Social Security number. It's an almost irresistible force.
I repeated that experiment in one of my classes with a pair of sunglasses. I had students write the last 2 digits of their PID, and sure enough, if the last 2 digits were higher, 6, 7, 8, or 9, those students tended to bid higher for the sunglasses. Crazy. Okay, so they finally make you an offer. I like this phrase, and this is kind of before they make you an offer. This is more during the interview. And I haven't used this trick. I saw it on PBS. I want to share it with you. Check it out.
And the guy who got the jobs, before every interview, he asked the interviewers, why did you bring me in today? What was it about my qualifications that made you attracted to my candidacy?
And what does that do?
It caused people to start focusing on the positive aspects of his case before they even began discussing it.
So really interesting. So during the interview, when you sit down, if you start off with a question like that, you might be able to use some priming as an advantage. Now, again, full disclosure, I've never used that. I saw that recently and I was like, that's really cool. I want to throw that in the workshop as well. Okay, so verbal offers. You always thank the recruiter with enthusiasm. Always ask, remember your question, when can I see this in writing? When can you email me this offer? All right, discuss it just simply to explore it, to understand it. And don't give them a yes or no on the phone immediately. Ask when the offer expires and to whom you should reply to and ask questions with. Okay, that's how you handle verbal offers. Any changes that you make need to be dictated in writing. Oftentimes I've had students, unfortunately, they've started work and they said, well, when I talked to the recruiter, they said I could do this, I could do that, and they were going to give me more money and they were going to give me this. And then, of course, you know, the HR manager, or whoever's there first day, says that person had no authority to do that. I'm so sorry, but we can't honor that. So make sure you get anything that you negotiate back to you in writing. All right. With written offers, I want you to review every area of this. Remember, you're on their side of the table. It's not you against them. It's, can you help me with this? And you can kind of use your status as a student and say, to be honest with you, I'm new to negotiating my compensation package. I'm wondering if you can help me with this. Because at this point, remember, they want you. Okay, they chose you. And so this is the kind of attitude that I want you to have while you're talking to the employer. You may be asked by the employer or the hiring manager, well, can we at least agree on the salary and then move on? I don't want you making any concessions. They're trying to take that token off the table. So instead say you're pleased with the progress, but you'd really like to review the whole package before you start making any concessions. Okay, review every area. Do not be shy about this. The phrase that I like to tell students to use as it relates to salaries, once you have the salary and all of the other benefits, I want you to go back to the employer and say, tell me, with the salary, is this the best that we can do? Is there any wiggle room with this number? All right, you throw the ball in their court. And they may say, well, maybe, what were you thinking? And then throw the ball right back at you. And this is where you present your research. And I want you to have the research with you, especially if this is a face-to-face conversation. Print out the articles, print out the ranges, okay, bring it with you so you can show the market rate appropriate salary based on your qualifications. If they say there's absolutely no room, no wiggle room whatsoever, then you can ask for a signing bonus. Some companies offer this. They don't advertise it. A signing bonus is a one-time payment to you for $2,000 or $5,000. It's a heck of a lot cheaper for a company to give you a signing bonus one time versus a bonus that will be set up as an annuity. I would also ask about a relocation fee, you know, especially if it's outside of the zip code and you have to break your lease with your apartment or what have you. Do they offer any kind of relocation expense? All right. But I say the signing bonus as kind of like the final ace up my sleeve before we close out the conversation. And again, let me reiterate, any revisions that you make sure they're sent to you again in writing so you have written proof. All right. Okay, so exploding offers I talked about. They say, I'm sorry, we didn't answer at 5 o'clock. How do you counter that? You know, you can do a conditional acceptance. The COVID-19 negotiation dilemma. This is something I added recently. So they may say to you, I'm so sorry, but due to COVID, we're really tight with our budget and there's not much that I can do. Here's a nice response. I understand, of course, the constraints under which all organizations are operating these days, but I'm confident that my productivity is going to be such that it will justify a salary in the range of blank to blank. You could try this phrase, you could try this response, okay? Remember, companies are not going to like you. They won't not like you if you try to negotiate the salary. Don't be timid, don't be shy, be professional, be polite, don't be pushy, but you can be polite, okay? Salary is not the same thing as compensation. These are two different things. Yes, the salary is a big piece of it, but your compensation package is so much more. And you know, based on my years in academia, I'm starting to see kind of the pendulum shift between a lot of my students accepting a lower salary, but having a far richer, far fatter compensation package that you know, allows them to enjoy a healthy work lifestyle balance. Okay. Working from home, additional vacation days, flexible hours, tuition reimbursement, just to name a few. All right, that is the end of the compensation negotiation workshop. Are there any other points that may require further clarification? Areas that I covered that any of you might want to explore further, or any specific questions any of you might have?
I feel like this was kind of geared towards business, but I was wondering if you thought that this kind of is applicable to education as well. Because from what I've heard, it's very like based off of your degree. Sometimes if you have too high of a degree, they don't want you because they feel like they have to pay you. Didn't know if there was a lot of flexibility in being a first year teacher.
Yes, great question. And is it? It's not at. What's your first name?
Oh, Alma. Sorry.
That's okay. Yes, no. So all of the tactics that I talked about today are universal tactics. So not just if you're, you know, graduating in the College of Business, but if you are pursuing a position in education or engineering, you can use the same tactics here. The important thing is, and you kind of mentioned it, try to understand and identify what's important to the employer and highlight those particular skills. So if advanced degrees are something that are very important, that would be something that I would highlight in my cover letter, on my resume, and an area that I would consider a strong talking point during the interview. Okay, great question. Other questions? Is it okay to ask how many vacation days you would have a year? Yeah, absolutely. But remember, you wait, Olivia, until they've made you the offer. Once they've made you the offer and that is not clearly displayed in the compensation package, I would definitely follow up with that question. But do not ask them about vacation days or anything that has to do with a benefit during the interview process. You keep it zipped during the interview process. Okay. Outside the position title and zip code, how do you know what is appropriate for you within a market salary range? What you can do, Hannah, is from that list of sites that I shared with you, it should provide a little clarification as it relates to if you have 0 to 3 years, you can expect this much in terms of experience, 3 to 5 years, this much, 5 to 7 years, this much. So don't skimp on your research there. Okay, Patricia, what do you do if you are in an internship but you don't graduate in 1 year, but you want to work there after you graduate? What should you do? Patricia, great question. I would ask during the internship process, maybe with a relationship, if you have a strong relationship with your boss or your supervisor, Patricia, ask them what is the percent of the interns that they hire. I mean, what's their success rate look like? And ask, what are some of the skills that you've seen are highly coveted for folks in this particular position? So there's no reason to just shut the door with them. Once your internship expires with them and you really loved it, ask for an extension. Ask for a second internship, or ask to be kept in the know in the event that there's any volunteer opportunities. You want to keep your toe in the water there, especially if you want a career there after school. Okay. Thank you. Okay, Anna says, I'm currently working for a financial institution due to a merge. I've accumulated a lot of years of experience. I have a lot of benefits. Recently posted for another position to grow professionally, and I was called for an interview. The interview went really well. Hiring manager asked me right away about my compensation desire. It's hilarious. To be honest, I did not know what to say. So remember, Anna, 80% of the negotiation takes place before the negotiation. And I would do this research before you even step in during the interview, because some hiring managers will drop this bomb on you right at the interview. And I want to make sure that you're not caught unprepared. You could try one of those phrases that I mentioned earlier. Good question. These are all good questions. There's a really good book I would like to recommend. I think the UCF library has a copy of it. And it's a book where I pulled some of this information from, and it's called What Color is Your Parachute? There's a whole section on compensation negotiation on this particular book. Now, as UCF students, all of you have access to LinkedIn Learning. And there are plenty of LinkedIn Learning video modules that kind of go over some compensation tips and tricks.
I have another quick question.
Yeah.
So you have the interview and then they either call or email you that you got the position to offer it to you. At that point, I mean, right there and then, is that when you're having the negotiation? Do you set up another meeting? Do you follow up in an email with, I had questions about, I'd like to like, what does that look like?
So yeah, so what I would do is I would ask to see the full compensation package in writing, sound excited about it, and I would review that compensation package and then ask when the, always ask for when the offer expires. You never want to give them a yes or no immediately.
Okay, so it doesn't necessarily happen like in a meeting. It could happen via email, this negotiation.
Yeah. I mean, I would recommend, I mean, this is just my style. I like to negotiate with people face to face because I have found that it's harder for someone to say no to you when you were sitting across from them, looking into their eyes, right? Versus
Yes.
a no over the phone or a no on an email. I can't tell you how easy it is for me to say no to students on email. But when they're in my office, I'll admit it's a little bit harder for me to say no. And so I think that is an advantage that all of you can take. This is your surroundings, right? Your situation. You might be able to take advantage of that situation, especially if you have a healthy working relationship with that individual. That supervisor has worked with you and they know what you're capable of. I would ask for a face-to-face meeting. And now that we're kind of slowly coming out of COVID, this is still, I think, a reasonable request. Also, one of the most important things that you can say during a negotiation, if you are sitting across from the employer face to face, is nothing. They give you an offer, they throw out a number. If you remain quiet for about 5 seconds and don't say a word, that can be one of the most important negotiating tactics during that particular situation. Because during those 5 seconds, which will seem like an eternity to your employer, they're going to say, oh my gosh, did I lowball this person? What's wrong with this position? We have such a tendency to want to, speed up the process and not leave any dead space in the conversation. Trust me when I tell you that if you remain silent during this process, that can be a very powerful negotiating tool. Okay. And I believe there's a QR code up here on the screen that our career services folks would like for you to scan for your phone. And this should take you to, hopefully this should take you to Handshake.
Thank you, Professor Leo. This was a great workshop, and I hope folks took some notes there and took pictures of some of your slides. Yes, just scan the QR code to check yourself into this workshop, and I'll hang out for a little bit in case anybody has any questions. Thank you so much, Dr. Leo.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone.